Yes, indeed. But I think that we shouldn't be so pessimistic. Tony and I have very healthy debates about these issues. But I've met so many young Indigenous leaders through a number of youth leadership programs, and they are talented, energetic, bright, focused, committed people. And I would hope that they're the kind of young Indigenous leaders that we will see in the future coming into our parliament, coming through our party, the Labor Party, independents, and becoming part of the system.
Well,
now,
not just
30
Indigenous,
years ago,
the question was black, so not just Indigenous.
It's not that the pool isn't there, it's not that the talent isn't there, it's having the access and having the opportunities to make it as white Australians make it.
It'll be a generational issue, and there are so many bright young people reflecting Australia's very diverse community that are now in leadership roles, and I think will be potential leaders.
Julie, we've got a long way to go. We haven't even yet elected our first female premier. We are still run by white blokes.
Our first female premier.
The three premiers we've had have all got into their position mid-term, and then Joan Kerner was voted out first time, Carmen Lawrence was voted out first time, and Anna Bligh will be the first elected premier.
What are you saying, Stephen?
I'm saying that we've got a long way to go on all these types of issues, and we're still too much run by a dominant white bloke.
The question was hardly that ambitious, though, saying in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Julie Bishop, it does raise this general question, though. I mean, can you imagine yourself becoming Prime Minister?
I can't believe you've asked me that question on national television. I mean,
where else would expect me to ask you privately behind the scenes, where you might answer the question?
I just thought you and I might have a private chat one night.
Who is more naturally senior, a bishop or an abbot?
OK, we're not going to let you off the hook. We're not going to let you off the hook.
Oh, I thought we were moving on to the next question.
I reckon we should stay here
right here.
Could you imagine yourself as the first Australian woman to become Prime Minister?
Politics is a very challenging game.
Imagine yourself is what I said.
Very challenging game. And
Do
it all
you
comes
imagine
down to,
yourself?
Tony, am I answering this question? It all comes down to chance and circumstance. And the point is there are more women in Parliament than before. We have a female Deputy Prime Minister. I am honoured to be the female Deputy Leader of the Opposition, although I think my greatest claim to fame is I'm the first West Australian to be in the leadership team of the Liberal Party. So, you know, that's... Thank you.
OK, but you mentioned those two words, chance and opportunity. Just let me ask you this.
Circumstance.
Who's got the biggest chance and the biggest opportunity of becoming the first female Prime Minister, you or Julie Gillard?
I'm not going to start crystal ball gazing. We've got a long way to go. We've got an election in 3 years' time. I mean, anything could happen.
All right, before we get any more spin, there's a question up the back. Yes, that's you, sir, with your hand up. Yes, that's you.
We're talking about race and colour and stuff like that. We didn't mention, or you didn't mention religion. And you're talking to Randa from Egyptian and Palestinian background, and yet you're asking her about an Islamic representative in the parliament. Islam is not a race. I come from Egypt, and I'd like to see one day someone from Egypt, but not from a certain religion.
OK, fair enough.
Parliament.
Good point. We'll take that point. Does anyone else have a... Yes, another gentleman here with his hand up.
A few years back, Tony, your party introduced a quota for women candidates. Is there an argument to introduce another quota for people from different racial backgrounds?
So I actually think in the state parliaments we're doing much better than we are in the federal parliament. In the state parliaments, in terms of at least diverse ethnic backgrounds, we've got a long way, and you look at the leadership and membership of cabinets around the country, and it's pretty impressive. Certainly in the Northern Territory Parliament, the Indigenous representation on the front bench is very impressive. I think that issue, over time, is actually fairly rapidly working its way through. But you're right, we were criticised at the time for introducing the 40% minimum women, 40% men. We never really had to work at the 40% men part of the equation. That was already there when it was introduced. But I don't think anyone would argue that the parliament is at a better place now for the diversity that's there.
The Labor Party dumps that quota when it suits it. You drop female candidates because somebody else, a male's coming on with the numbers, and you do it time and time again.
Machine men, kneecapping women all the time.
It happened in the last federal election. It happened in the last federal election. Now, I don't believe that quotas have the desired outcome. We don't have a quota in the Liberal Party. We've got about the same number of female members in the Liberal Party as we do have in the Labor Party federally. But in the last election, when it suited the Labor Party to dump a female candidate for a union secretary, one of the stale, pale male, you went for it.
OK. All right, how are your kneecaps feeling?
It's all become a bit weird.
All right. That happens on live television, don't worry. Our next question comes from James Bates, and it's in the audience.
Given Obama's early childhood links to Indonesia, I was wondering what any of you thought perhaps if he becomes president, we'd see a more engaged US with Southeast Asia? And if so, how would that in any way change Australia's role in the region?
Let's throw that to Greg Sheridan.
Well, this is a historic election because both candidates have lived for several years in Southeast Asia. Obama went to 2 different schools in Indonesia, and John McCain stayed at a hotel, the Hanoi Hilton, for several years. Admittedly, they were both eccentric experiences. But the truth is, look, I hate to say this, but let me say, Kevin Rudd was absolutely right today when he said both these candidates are good for Australia. McCain is an Asia-Pacific man through and through. He fell in love with Australians in Vietnam, like all Americans who served in Vietnam. And Obama came to Australia transiting on his way to and from Indonesia. The Democratic Party tends to be the Atlantic Party and the Republican Party tends to be the Pacific Party. And I think Obama would be dominated by Atlanticists and Obama administration. But they're both going to like Australia. It's not hard to like Australia. You know, there are some Australians you don't like, but it's not hard to like Australia.
Tony Burke, the Prime Minister's talking about changing our relationship to Asia. Would he welcome the possibility of a president who's lived in Indonesia?
I think you welcome the possibility of presidents who are passionate about our region. And one of the things that Kevin's done since he took on the job is show a very real commitment in foreign policy, both throughout the Asian region, but also in particular to the Pacific. So I think in either case, we're going to have an American president very much focused on similar foreign policy issues to what's going to be in Australia's interest.
Just while we're on this question, is the Prime Minister now having to make up for having ignored Japan for quite a long time?
Now, I was in Japan in April of this year, and the allegation was running in the Australian media at the time that we'd ignored Japan. Now, that was April. We came to government, we were sworn in December. I was the 5th minister to be there in those few months. We'd been in office for just over 100 days. We haven't ignored Japan. Japan's our largest trading partner, or certainly our largest source of exports. Yes, the Prime Minister, Kevin's also very well positioned to have good relationships with China. But, I mean, when I addressed the National Press Club in Tokyo, the argument that had been running in Australia certainly wasn't being put to me.
Tony's a good man, but he's talking absolute baloney there. The Japanese are wild at the Rudd government for sending the Prime Minister to China for 4 days, not going to Japan at all, when they're not only our biggest export market, but they're our diplomatic partner in Asia. They're a fellow democracy. They're a fellow ally of the US. They support us in all of our diplomatic activities in the region, and they're paranoid about China.
And they cop all this grief about whaling from us.
Yeah, and the Labor Party comes to office and runs a jihad on whaling, more passionate than they are about humans in Tibet. I mean, if you're unkind to whales, it's worse than if you kill human beings.
Well, I can't let Tony Burke... I can't... Sorry, fair enough. I can't not give Tony Burke a quick right of reply. It is interesting to note that he's spending 5 days in Japan, 4 days in China. So it does sound like something's going on there.
Well, I'm not surprised Greg disagrees with me, because when I was talking about the articles that have been running in the Australian media, a good number of them were written by Greg.
Quoting Japanese, you saw the interview with Yoichi Funabashi.
Yeah.
I didn't make that up.
All right. Julie Bishop, let's hear you on that.
Well, Tony, you know that the Prime Minister, when he was in the United States, had raised with him the US administration's concerns about the way the new government was treating Japan and cancelling security arrangements with them, our focus on whaling without picking up the phone and speaking to the Prime Minister. You know that even the US administration was concerned about our relationship with Japan and raised it directly with the Prime Minister. So I think what he's trying to do now is make up ground, but it's the kind of thing that goes very deep, and this is such a significant relationship to Australia. It's not something to be trifled with.
All right, quick right of reply from Tony Burke, and then I'll draw a line under this.
Oh, just in terms of trifling with it, 5 cabinet ministers in the first 100 days of the government isn't bad. Certainly a higher engagement than the first 100 days of the previous government.
The Prime Minister, and you know it. It's the Prime Minister. OK, well, remember that QandA is live. I think you've probably already figured that out. From 9:35 in the eastern states, and you can put questions via our website or via SMS. Simply text your name, location, state